My name's Don. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Don.
I'd like to tell you I'm glad to be here, but I don't like it. And I know you don't either, so I guess we're even. But I am glad to be at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. If I had to be in one in prison, I'm glad it's at this one. I came up here a couple of years ago. I would be lying to you if I said I remembered everybody that I met then. There's been too many faces pass in front of me, and I don't retain that well. But it's good to be sober. It's good to be in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm going to try to tell you a little what I used to be like and what happened to me, what I'm trying to be like today. And if I'm able at all to give you any kind of a message beyond the most important one, I hope I might be able to show you that no matter what your garbage is, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous will accept you. It'll rearrange you, and it'll allow you to live in a manner on the outside that's acceptable to everybody around you. And I call that a miracle. But I wasn't living that way when I first went to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was born and raised in Bakersfield, California, and I like to think that is a good reason to drink. They do it as a profession there. I also was a liar, and I was a cheat, and I was a thief, and I committed felonious crimes against animal and man. And the pressure got bad enough, I took up drinking. And that's just about the order in which it came in. I've been sober 16 years and 6 months today, if it's still the 13th. I haven't had any chemical affect me from the neck up. I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous on the outside for 18 years and 6 months and about 7 days. And just to cut through some of the crap, I did 21 out of 26 years inside. That's going back to as far as you can get. I was 9 years of age, and they put me away for 3 years, and then I got out, and they sent me up for a year, and then I started drinking. And alcohol to me was the kindest thing I was ever involved myself with. Alcohol was kind to those around me when I drank it. I was not a violent man when I was drunk necessarily, unless I was put upon. When I was in between drinks or needed some money, and I don't like to work, I am still not fond of working, it's just necessary. Whenever I was in that condition, alcohol would be what I was after, and I would go to any lengths to get it, the money I needed to get that alcohol. In Bakersfield, they raise you to drink. It's a country town. I'm a country boy. I love country music, and I love smoky bars, places you can smell the toilet from the street. And you walk in there, and it gets loud. And I wanted to be a gangster as long as I could remember. As early of an age as I can remember, I wanted to be a gangster. I had, if Don Gillender and all of them had a fan club, I'd have been the head of it. It excited me. It allowed me to not work, and for a few moments, it gave me a sense of power that nothing else in the world gave me. And like Richard, I'd walk down the middle of the street at night also. I've been afraid since early as I can remember. Number one, I was rather skinny as a kid. And when you're raising up around country boys, and they ain't but three things they like to do, and drinking and fighting is two of them, and the other one, they scared me, so I wasn't into that yet. Being raised on a farm, though, I already knew everything functioned. It just I had this terrible sense of guilt all the time. It became complicated in later years. You know how to get them up off all fours. When you're trying to be John Wayne and John ain't kissing his horse, you know, you don't fit in. Alcohol, at 13 years of age and 12, 13, 14 years of age, it was party time. That was all. I'm not a good thief. And I think any of you in here with a background such as mine knows that good thieves don't spend 18 years as an adult in the state penitentiaries. That's not a sign of a good thief. I don't mean to disappoint any of you. Your resume, as thieves will go, won't show up well if you've served that much time in that short of a year. And I was an armed robber in my hometown without a mask. I showed alcoholic thinking at a very early age. I just didn't know it. I didn't know it. At 16 years of age, I took up armed robbery I wanted it. It's what I wanted to do. I got tricked into it. I made the mistake of turning to my buddy when we were waiting trial for a burglary. I said, you know, if I could get a gun, I could get us some money, we'd buy a car and go to Arkansas. And at that time, when you're waiting trial for a burglary like that, and you've already been down twice, Arkansas can look real good. But I didn't know that his answer was going to be, well, I can get a gun. You see, I think I might not have made that statement. And at 16, I stood about 5'10". I weighed about 100 pounds with everything on. The 45 was hard to hold. When you're walking up to an oil field worker and he's got a hard hat and leather and he's big and his nose is turned 3 different directions and there's scars, it looks a lot like Fred. Oh, sorry, Fred. When you're walking up to something like that and you're 16 and this pistol is dipping, much like what the psychiatrist used to say I thought it was, and it shakes a lot, and you got a 16-year-old voice that's cracking, you know, get your hands up! You know, just without alcohol, I wouldn't have been able to perform that. So alcohol did aid me in my talent. But as I say, I did it without a mask, and so I went to a state reform school. When I went to Alcoholics Anonymous first time, it was 1957. I was between 21 and 22 years of age. I served 2 5-year life sentences, and I was in Soledad. I was over in the barracks in the minimum side, and I was sitting out there along the yard, and in through the gate walked a couple of men, a couple of women. They was old, but, you know, they didn't look that old. and I looked across there, and they was gray, but they didn't look that gray. And I'd been down about 1.5 years, and I asked them, what is that? And they said, that's an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And they give coffee and donuts there. And I said, the women are there too? And they said, yeah. I said, I'd like to go to that program. And I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got out of it exactly what I went in there for. I got a cup of coffee. I looked at some legs that didn't have hair on them. And when I walked out of there, I was armed with enough information to know that I'd never go to one of them places again. I'd rather hold court in the street. People got up there and told things about themselves that you and I have been trained not to do. Number one, I have spent from 9 years of age to that 21 learning you don't tell nobody nothing. And you don't ever show an emotion. I would have been a great poker player if I'd lived over here in those days, because you don't show an emotion. You can't walk out on the yard in Folsom or San Quentin and tell the guys as you're stepping out there, Jesus, you know, I really feel fearful today. No. And so all this was buried. All this is buried inside. If you start at 9 and you're as skinny as I am, the first thing you're tested with is you got to defend this little round brown back there. You know? I held court, held my mud, and took a good whipping, and found out if you act real crazy and attack them real hard, they won't come back and bother you again. And so life began. That was life. Alcohol was a friend. It worked well. One of the most difficult things I had in this program was identifying as an alcoholic who could not drink or use any kind of chemical. Very, very hard time. I didn't have a problem with alcohol until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, because I had never tried to quit. State had quit me. You know, they lock you up, you go through the guidance center, you got about 3 to 4 months if you're not too well healed. I didn't have much income, I wore everybody out early. You got about 2 to 3 months, 4 months before you're going to have a chance to score anything. So there was long dry spells, and any one of those I could look back at and say, hell, I couldn't be an alcoholic. I spent a year, my first year I spent without even getting down. Alcoholic can't do that. They're winos. They're out there on Skid Row. You know, they're laying around in gutters. I don't lay in gutters. I take guns. I hurt people to keep from laying in gutters. I wouldn't lay in a gutter, had you asked me. Now that was at 22, and I served 2.5. I was out 72 days. I went back for 3, met a redhead on the outside. I was afraid to play around like that, you know. I was defending this thing rather strongly. I wasn't much for hugging. You've already seen enough hugging here tonight to make any of you nervous, you know. And you can tell our judgment hasn't passed much better in either. We hug anything. You're ugly, we hug you. You're handsome, we hug you, you know. I'm still a little nervous, though, if your hand moves off my shoulder. I want to know that there's just 2 things moving back there. Left and right. I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous out of prison. I did the 3. I met her. She had 3 children. I am conditioned to control people with fear, because that's what you do. You got to stand your ground. You got to hold your mud. And if it requires collecting, you do what you have to do to collect. If it requires defending, you do what you have to do to defend. If you spend enough years locked up, there's some people that are dead and there's people that are hurt. And you feel that responsibility, but you write it off in your head. Is that that's part of the game. That's part of the game. They played the game, and that's the way the game goes, and so I ain't done nothing wrong. And if I get caught at it, I pick up my tab. I go to penitentiary, I serve my time, and I pick up my tab, and I played the game properly. We were in the middle of a robbery. I was driving a car. I don't usually do that. I like to maintain control. I like to be inside with the gun. I want to keep control. I wasn't drunk. My 2 crime partners weren't drunk. They were all like myself, had the same background. They run out of there with a cigar box full of money. It was about $4,800. We felt good, headed for Ventura. Got a little bit of alcohol and began to relax. You know, you're successful at your business. You're supposed to relax once in a while. We began to relax, and I was busted about 3 weeks later for a parole violation, excessive drinking. I was offended that they always put that on my record. They always had excessive drinking, associating with ex-convicts, and failing to cooperate with the parole officer. And then they walked me into the little old room there, and the 2 robbery cops that known me ever since I was a pup sit me down, and they said, you know, we got a murder first on you. And I looked at them, and I didn't change expressions because I'm well-trained. I don't talk to cops because I'm well-trained. I don't like policemen. They don't like me. It's a unanimous, we all feel proper that that's the way it should be. But inside of me, I didn't know what they were talking about. And it turned out during the course of that robbery, one of my crime partners shoved a .45 into a very old woman's face, and she had a heart attack. These 2 cops looked at me for a minute, and they'd been around me a long time. And I, like I say, I didn't earn my way in and out of prison. I went up every time I went. But they took me over on the side, and they said, Don, we already know by the identification of mugshots who the 2 men inside were, who was the one out in the car. And I had nothing to say. I had nothing to say because the game is played that way. And isn't that a shame? Because inside of me, I wanted to scream. No, thank you. I don't mind a 5 to life and a couple of 2.5s and a 3 and a 7 and a 7-3. I don't mind that a little bit, but let's not talk about that big one. And then they said, ask me again. I wouldn't answer. And they took me out in the corridor. And one of them turned to me and he says, you know, we've been around you a long time. We believe somewhere inside of you there's something good. Now we're going to ask you this, and we're just going to do it and tell you that nothing else is going to be said about it. And we need to look for the 3rd man. And all I did was went like this. That was the end of it. I went back to penitentiary on a parole violation, served 7 years and 3 months, went to Alcoholics Anonymous because the parole board liked that. And I come out of that place absolutely convinced I can't serve any more time. I can't take any more. I'm 34 years old, and I got 20 years spent in these damn places. I can't take any more. Can't do it. I'd rather go ahead and die right out here on the street.
I always liked that out of television. Whole court in the street. That's good until you get one of them elastic 38s, you know. You get a 38 and it gets right in front of you, the barrel begins to grow. And if you're like I am, you say, well, maybe this time I'll go back, but next time you ain't taking me, you know. 1970, I went back. I stayed out of prison 72 days after that, 7 years and 3 months. That's how much it meant. I had no control over it. I had no control over it. When I hit the streets in Bakersfield, the only thing I knew was I feel sick. I feel sick inside. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to work. I don't know how to earn a living. I don't know how to live on the outside. I'm an armed robber. I like my money quick and fast, and let's get on down the road. And I felt sick because I knew I can't make it. I can't make it. 72 days from that day, I was in a strip cell in the Kern County Jail. And I'm laying around in that little hole in the floor. They got the light window shut off so it's real dark, and the tears start coming out of my eyes, and I don't cry. I don't cry. I spent 37 days eating one meal every 3 days. I've got my ass kicked all over cotton fields in Bakersfield, and I've been put upon by them guards, and I've been tear gassed in them little old cells where there ain't no ventilation, and I've had all the punishments, and I don't cry, but I laid there and I thought, I can't take any more. Just can't take any more, and they're sending me back. An odd thing happened. I went back to prison for 1 year. I hadn't done 1 year since I was 18 years old, you know. I thought I died and went to heaven. And in that year, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, and during the time I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous, I went to write an inventory with an inside sponsor, convict, and I wrote about 4 pages, and in that 4 pages was enough information to put me away from my natural life. And so I knew I couldn't make this program. I knew I couldn't let them normies, those square johns, know. How in the hell are you going to give up that kind of information? And this thing is telling you right there in plain language. You need to take these steps. And how am I going to do it? I don't have guilt for most of my crimes. You can tell that robbery. I don't have guilt over those men in prison. I don't have guilt over the knife, the butcher knife in the wife's belly because she wouldn't stop asking me where the hell I've been. I don't have guilt on that because I was playing the game according to its rules. I wasn't playing the game the night that woman died. The only good woman in my life was my grandmother, and that was the same age woman, and I felt very, very bad. I felt very, very bad. Didn't know what to do about it. The next 2 years in Alcoholics Anonymous was a matter of my being on the outside, which really was a miracle without my even knowing it. I'm out now 2 years. I ain't been out 2 years since 1944 in a row, you know. I've got a job. But I'm in and out of AA. I'm drunk. I'm sober. Newcomer walks in the room. The old timers tell me, leave her alone. Let her get off her back. I fall in love. We leave. I'm drunk. I'm sober. And then I quit drinking. 1972, I quit drinking. Because I'm tough. I took all those beatings. I took all that crap. I can quit drinking if I really want to. And I quit. And by nightfall, I'd been drinking a little bit. And when I walked in and that woman asked me if I'd got a job today, I whooped her around the house because that's how I control people that scare me. And the next morning I made her that promise because I'm not a fool. I don't want to get kicked out of that house. That house is feeding me. I don't work, you know. And I told her, today I'll go get a job. And we spent the next 2 months with every day an exact duplicate of that one. And I finally come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. You walk in a room and there's about... In this case, it was a Pacific group. In 1972, there was maybe 200 people there, 300. We run 945 people at our home group meeting every Wednesday night now. So it's expanded a little bit. I kind of like that. I can get lost in there, you know. And I walked into those rooms, and there's men hugging men. I don't play that crap. I spent a lifetime keeping that from happening. And you ain't going to sneak up on me. There's the guys of Alcoholics Anonymous out here on the street. I'm close to Hollywood. I know what happens down there in L.A. You know, I don't play that. You ain't getting me. And then it says, we care, and I'm thinking, sure, you care. I knew some sheep that cared, too. Wait till you hear about them. You ain't going to like me so well. Let's talk about children. Let's talk about deaths. Let's talk about crimes that have never been convicted for. How am I going to give you that information? There was one problem. I had tried to quit drinking for 2 months and couldn't get it done. I was afraid to drink. Without alcohol, I don't function. I don't stand a chance, because without alcohol, I am a terror. I am insane. I get into violent eruptions that I don't even know are about to happen. The only sign I get is the back of my neck prickles, and I get these little black spots. And that's the only sign I get of violence coming about. And by the time I recognize it, somebody is already laid out, or I am, or the walls are kicked in, or the furniture is broken, or the children are laying up against the wall, and there's blood coming off of their mouths where I've hit them. And then I walk out a door and I think to myself, God, I didn't want to do that. That is not what I want to be. That ain't what I want to be. I don't want that to happen. God has a funny sense of humor. I'm going to refer to him as God because I understand that's his name. Probably his first name, but it's all right. I got a sponsor. If God ever comes to talk to me, I'll listen to him and I'll believe it's him, and then I'll run to my sponsor and ask him if he's giving me the right direction. I'm brainwashed. Now, that might offend some, except I ain't been inside of a penitentiary as a convict for 18 years and 6 months and some days. I'm not offended anymore. I feel good. But we had some problems. When I was 16 and in the state reform school, 3 of us was out on the yard, and one of us walked into the washroom, and one of the Chicanos there made a comment, and that particular guy, he had a pair of homemade brass knuckles that the metal was tore on it, and he proceeded to whoop on their heads, and he was splitting heads every time he hit. And so it ended up with 18 of them attacking 3 of us. Now, when you're attacked by 18 men and you leave that situation, you know that you can't trust that race of people anymore. you just kind of know. And so you take them and you put them over here on the block. And that's a little black and white area of your life. You either trust or you don't. They fit or they don't. And you put them right over here and they're not a part of your life anymore. If you're walking in those penitentiaries and you're as skinny as I was in the beginning and fearful as I was, and you got to take whippings and you got to put them out and you got to get weapons and come off with all that crap in order to save this little round brown back here, the bottom line is you don't like gay people. You don't like sissies in there. You don't like homosexuals, and you put them in this little square block and you set them over here right with the other ones. And all the time I'm sitting in these meetings and it says we care, and they're telling me I got to put my hand out to these people that I don't associate with. Thank you very much. He's got a sense of humor. I'm walking down a corridor at Tracy. There's about a half a dozen black dudes coming down one side. You know how they got the lines. You all know where to walk, when to move, how to do everything. And they're moving like this, and this little white dude stepped up to my ear, and he wanted to ask me about who had anything on the yard. And as he did, these half a dozen moved over, and they started jigging everybody, and he got stabbed 6 times and fell dead. And if it hadn't have been for him asking that question, I would have fell dead. And so I knew I can't trust these people, and I put them in that little block and put them right up here. And now I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous, and everybody's talking around fellowship, comrade, we care, we all love each other. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have an awful lot of obstacles in front of me that's going to stop this program from working. I want to be sober. I want to be sober more than anything I know. I've been out of prison over 2 years at this point. I have finally realized that if I take care of this drinking thing and go to AA, I don't have to worry about this prison thing, because I'm not going to prison anymore. I'm still stealing, but it's at a level low enough that it's, I call it socially acceptable. 30, 60 days, 30 or 60 days is breath-catching time. In walks this meeting one day, this big old heavy-duty Mexican dude. He's got one eye popped out of his head. I liked him immediately because he lost that eye burglarizing the Catholic Church in a blackout, and he fell off the roof. My last burglary, I got lost in the attic. I was under Benzodrine for 6 days, and everything turned to spiders. You know how that'll do to you. And Ramon was a very whipped man, and he fell in love with this program as soon as he walked through the door. And then he and I were sitting around talking one day, and must be a year or so later. We're going to AA meetings all the time together. We're sitting around talking one day, and he starts telling me about this killing that he had done on the East Coast. He had done it for a little bit of cash, so it's all in the game. And then he started telling me about this one that got killed up in Seattle. And nobody knew about it, and it wasn't his intention because he was in a blackout, and he had to be told about it later. And I got weak for a moment, and I told him about two. And that exchange did something, because I backed away from that conversation, and I went back to my apartment, and I looked back at that conversation, and I thought, my God, I'm getting weak. I'll never be able to make it in the penitentiary anymore. That's a blessing if you ever reach that point. Ramon and I became very dear friends, very good friends. At 12 years of sobriety, he got cancer. Very large man, powerful man. When the cancer got through with him, he was skin on bones, and he was laying in a bed, and I put spaghetti in his mouth and hold his head up, and he would puke it out, and I would catch it and put a little more spaghetti in his mouth, and sometimes it would go down. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at a man I've just spent 12 years with, that I've gone to AA, I've gone everywhere there is, and I've become very close to. And I want this man to know, I know he's dying, he knows he's dying, we've talked about it, and I want him to know how much he means to me. And the last day I walked into the hospital, and I looked down at him, and I kissed him on his forehead, and I said, I love you, Vato, and he says, I love you too. And there wasn't a question of masculinity. I wasn't worried about my little round brown, you know. It was just a matter of I wanted this man to know what he meant to me, and he died, and I never was to see him again. And that was a beautiful experience. When I was first sober, I met a newcomer that I was supposed to leave alone. She got pregnant. How that happens. 2 years later, she got divorced. We got married. A daughter and a 4-year-old stepson. And in those first 4 years, my stepson would come up to me and hug my leg. And when he'd hug my leg, I'd get this warm, sick feeling in my stomach. It'd be a warm feeling. And I know where my head's at. And I'd shove this kid away from me. And this kid needs love, and I don't know how to give it to him. I'm a good member of AA. I'm going to meetings 7 nights a week. I am got commitments. I am even talking to you-know-who every day because my sponsor said I had to. But I can't touch this boy because men don't touch me. And by the time I had 12 years with Ramon, and I was able to walk in and tell the man I loved him and say goodbye to him, by that time, my son would come into my arms, and I could kiss him on his mouth and tell him I love him. And that warm feeling would come, and that warm feeling wasn't degradation. That warm feeling was just love. Didn't know it. I didn't recognize it because I hadn't had it before. It was just a feeling of love. I was standing in our yard one day out there where we play softball, and a voice behind me says, Don, can I talk to you a minute? And I turned around and I said, sure, Bill. Now, I've already told you I don't like policemen. I don't dislike them. It's just that that's part of the game. And I turned around and I said, sure, Bill, because I'm brainwashed some 7 or 8 years now. I say yes to AA. I said yes to AA. That's what I'm supposed to do. I went to the boss. I said, can I have 2 days off? I got 2 floating holidays. They want me to speak at a prison in Nevada. She chuckled for a few minutes and said, of course, if you'd like. And here I am. I just say yes to AA. If I'm supposed to do it, it'll fall in place. If it doesn't, I don't give a damn. I did what I'm supposed to do. It's none of my business how the outcome is. If I get on my knees, tell God, listen, you know, all I need, give me 5-card run. Just give me 5 deals at that table, a run in my favor. That's all I want. He don't play 21. If he does it poorly. You know? So I gave up praying to the sucker for that crap. And I turned to Bill and I said, yes, Bill, of course. And he says, I need a sponsor. Will you sponsor me? And I said, yes, Bill, of course. And he turned and walked away. I looked up at the sky and I said, you're cute. Bill's 18 years with the LAPD. I'm going to sponsor a policeman. They call that poetic justice. 2.5 years later, Bill made changes in his life, and it took him out of our area. And our sponsor-baby relationship severed. Our friendship continued, and I took this little block I had over here. I took this block with Ramon, and I put it over here, and I painted it gray. I have no problem about that anymore. It's not a matter of trusting. It's a matter of an alcoholic to an alcoholic. It's a matter of loving one human being to another. And now I got this block over here, and I move it over here, and I paint that sucker gray, and that's the policeman. Ain't that something? Down in L.A., they're getting crazier than hell. I'm kind of glad there are cops around there. I get real nervous. Them people are getting violent out there. It's almost, you're not sure if you're safe on the street anymore. I always want to walk around with my number pressed on here, you know. I'm one of you. But they'd look in my eyes, see that weakness, and take me out just like that. You know it, and I know it. I wouldn't fit here no more. I wouldn't. I'd be in big trouble. Don't even want to try it. I'm standing at a Wednesday night meeting. A voice behind me says, "Hi, Don, can I speak to you a minute?" And I turned around and I said, "Sure, John." And John says, "I need a sponsor." And I said, "Sure, John." And then John walked off, and I looked up and I said, "You really are cute," because John's gay. And I got this difficulty. I've already told you about this difficulty. See, he's up here, and what in the hell am I going to do? And then I said, "Well, it's none of my business." And then he called me. In the course of a few weeks, he called me damn near every day, and all of a sudden, I'm taking a liking to this guy. He's got things just like I do. I never knew that. I thought they had to be different. Not different. One day he come up to me at the Wednesday night meeting. He said, "Something I never told you, Don." I said, "What's that?" He says, "I'm gay." I said, "John, you think I can spend 21 years locked up and not know you're gay?" I said, "Do you have a problem with that?" He says, "No." I said, "Good, because I don't have any answers." I said, "The only condition I have on you and I in our relationship is you can't wear a dress to the Wednesday night meeting." He didn't laugh quite as hard, but he did later. It became one of his favorite little stories. 5 years went by. In the course of all this time, I have divorced sober, married at sober, divorced sober. I'm becoming a child support paying normal human being. God, I love this. I used to collect them checks when they come in, Now I'm having to pay it. And then God's sense of humor sent me up on something with a different kind of disease. It was Catholic. It didn't drink, but it practiced those principles in all her affairs. And I thought, oh my God, this was 11 years ago. I worked on her for 2 years. I'm slick. I got the gift. I can talk. One day she told me, she said, "What you're asking me to do against my principles would be no different than my asking you to take a drink." What a lousy goddamn way to hold out on me. What a lousy tool to use on a poor guy like me who's trying to stay sober. So I decided that we would go through the proper procedures. I'd never done that before. Relationship is you grab them before they really recognize what you are. You get them into the bed, you get them committed, and then you control them. And if you use enough fear, they'll always be good. That's a relationship. Now I can't do this. At 5 years of sobriety, I gave up my right to control another human being by physical violence because my own daughter got hurt by my physical violence. And I lost that right. I don't want to get drunk, and I'll get drunk if it happens again. And so now I've got this, 110 pounds. I get mad. I can drop her. I know I can take her. But the program says I might get drunk. Therefore, I have to learn to communicate. And I communicate like this. Your mama, your daddy, your grandma. And she looks at me. And after a few years, and then she tells me one time, "I don't care what you say to me because I know your program demands that you make me an amends." She's not an Al-Anon. We spent 8.5 years engaged. She wouldn't live with me. I was getting as creative on the outside as I was in the inside. Socks laying all over the place. Never mind. It was a hard 8.5 years. July the 19th, 1987, I walked into the Catholic church, stood up there, the priest slapped me upside the head, threw water on me, made me one of them. September the 19th of that same year, I went into that same church, and that church was filled wall to wall, and there was over 500 people there, and it was our wedding day, and this bride came down. She'd never been married, so she wanted the full thing, and it was the most beautiful experience I had. And I'm hugging men, and men are hugging me, and the tears are running out of our eyes, and people are paying debts off over here on the side, the bets they lost that I would never get married. We went over to this sponsor of mine's yard, and in the middle of that yard was this gigantic wedding cake. 3-tier wedding cake with a bride and a groom. I mean, it was so touching, you had to get wet. Your eyes just had to get wet. And then the cop is coming by, and he's hugging me, and the con is coming by, and he's hugging me, and the sissies are coming by, and they're hugging me. Everybody's hugging, and it was just a beautiful experience, and the cake was a gift from John. And it showed all the gentleness John ever had. John, whatever he was gentle. And he gave me gentleness by working with him. He called me one day and said he had a problem. He had this person that he was interested in. I put the phone about that far. I don't pay this crap, Lord. You know, I don't know how to answer. This man's talking about another man. You know, and I hung this phone over here, and I said a little quick prayer. If you want me to have the right words for him, you better get them out quick. I picked up the telephone, and I began to tell him, why don't you try just being a friend? Why don't you just try going into a different sequence, into a relationship? Just be a friend, and then if you like each other, you might spend a little more time with each other. And then I hung up the phone, and I sweated, because I kept expecting any day for John to walk in with Jack and say, this is my new girl, you know, or boy, whatever the hell he is. And about a month went by, and I said, John, how you doing with that relationship? He said, what more? And I reminded him of it, and he said, oh, hell, I was through with that the next day. I worried about it for a month and a half. John got AIDS. John been sober over 5.5 years. He hadn't been promiscuous. He hadn't been fooling around since his first year, and he got this AIDS. And the AIDS began to tear at him. And that wedding cake to me was John. And John laid in that hospital, and I'd walk up there, and I'd sit there and hold his hand, and the sweat and the fluids. And I'm just sitting there thinking, you know, I remember a gunshot in an alley when I was 16 years old, and they were trying to blow my head off because I was running from the cops, and they were yelling, stop. I remember the shots going off up there at Folsom when they opened up in the cell block, and you pull your mattress up, and the ricochets are splitting, and they're hitting the mattress. And I remember all the opportunities there was to die, and here I am, sitting there holding this hand of this man who's got this horrible disease. I don't have to worry about what his problems, what his fluids are. I don't have to worry about that. If it's my time, I'm gone. If it ain't, I won't. The rest of it's none of my damn business. So I managed to get up and see him regularly, and he struggled back and forth, spinal meningitis, pneumonia, cancer. All of it started hitting him, you know. I went up there one night, and John, my wife, was with me, and there was 3 other AA people there, and his mother and his father, and he asked every one of them to leave the room, and except for myself. He said he wanted to talk to me, and they all left, and he started dictating his memorial service to me. He started telling me how he wanted this memorial service and who he wanted to participate in it. And I let him talk about it a while, and then I said, John, what did you really want to talk about? And he says, I'm scared. And I said, you're supposed to be scared. He knows he's dying. I said, you're supposed to be scared. He says, but I'm really scared. I'm afraid of what is it? What am I going to? And I says, John, you remember that crazy, wild-eyed old Mexican I used to tell you about all the time, Ramon? And he said, yeah. I said, I'll make you a promise as we stand here today. When your time comes, Ramon will be there to get you. He'll be standing right there to meet you. And the fear fell right off his face. Now, you know and I know, I can't tell him that with any conviction, but the fear fell right off his face, because the one thing that Alcoholics Anonymous had given me was the ability to recognize fear and the ability to overcome it and get rid of it. And by the time that was done, these other people from AA walked into that hospital room, and they started putting in the missing ingredient. They started putting the love in. And by midnight, this man only had 2 hours to live when we went over there. By midnight, he's sitting over in the corner with a piece of pizza trying to bite it off. His cancer's got his lips so big he can't hardly chew. And he was to come out of that hospital, and he was to last another, I guess, about 3 weeks, something like that. And then we got a call that he only had a couple hours, whatever time it was. And I went over to that hospital, and I held his hand again, and we talked, and I said, is everything in order? And I knew a couple of boys that went to the chamber. I've talked to people that sit on the row. It's important to have your house in order and to feel some sense of dignity. In Alcoholics Anonymous, it's important to have your house in order and to feel some sense of dignity. And John said, yeah, everything's all right. Everything's all right. I says, are you right with me? And I said, are you right with God? He says, I'm right with everything. And I said, well, I'm going to leave you for right now. And I walked out, and John died the next day. Alcoholics Anonymous is a beautiful program. I'm blessed, you know. Coming up here is no big deal. I hate penitentiaries. I hate them. I don't ever want to. I don't like going. Every time you ask me to go to one, I don't like going. I don't say no. I just do it. I just take the action. Results is none of my business. I'm still filled with crime. I love armored trucks. You let the doors of an armored truck open up, it's like the legs of a lady. It's a sensuous experience. You just want... And I stand outside a building, and my building that I'm an operating engineer is 16 stories. I got all the master keys to it. They think I'm a normal human being. And an armored truck comes up there every day, and he unloads his money, and sometimes I help him open the door. He don't know. He don't know. In all these years, nobody has spent 5 minutes trying to get me to quit thinking the way I think. Because I'm a lustful human being. If I see a woman and she even flashes a little there, I've already tell her what color her panties are. I'm going to look. I'm going to always look. I just don't act on it. I think of crime. I look at crime. I don't act on it. I think of violence. I want to be violent. I want to control somebody else because in the truth, I'm just afraid of them. I'm just feeling fear, and I didn't even know it was fear. Nobody could ever told me I was a fearful human being. I've done too many things to disprove it. And I'm a fearful human being. And I have no problem with people anymore. And I have no problem with hugs. And some days I love AA, and some days I love living, and some days it's a terror. And some days I get very despondent. And it lasts for a few hours, and then it passes by. And I go to an AA meeting, and I let some ugly old duck hug me. And I walk around and kiss a couple of young ladies, and somebody comes up and thanks me for something I've done. Or they come up and ask me to do something so that I know I have to be sober one more time, one more day. My life is very full. I'm a very fortunate man. I hope when you come out of here, whatever, if you got any question whatsoever, I hope you'll investigate. I hope you don't walk out there thinking that you have to be the perfect member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bullshit. Walk out there, walk in the door, and be what you got to be. I was violent in AA. I was crazy in AA. I was violent with my wife, with my children. I was crazy in my home. I am sober tonight. I no longer act that way, and the program took me with the mess I was and made me whatever the hell it is I am today. Thanks for letting me show it.